I know some of you were probably wondering how long it was going to be before I started changing everything up. If you've been keeping track on your calendar, then you know that a year ago today was the first time I ever preached for you all. And you invited me back, which was something in itself, so I had to write a second sermon. Not really, I had to. I was thinking this week while I was working frantically to get the sound booth back in shape. When I started in the ministry, not many of our churches had PA systems. Now that seems hard to believe, doesn't it? That we were, at that point at one time, we had just survived the church splits over padded pews. And I took 2 congregations through installing PA systems in their buildings. That was no small feat because I was going to be a mechanic as a high school student, not an electrician and certainly not an electronics expert. So you had to deal with learning all that new phase as well as holding a congregation together at the same time. And I was the ripe old age of 27 years old, so I was very mature for my age. Deb has been sworn to secrecy on that one. But we've gone through a number of changes, and now look where we're at. It is amazing. I used to talk with my grandparents and think I'll never see all the changes and advancements that they've seen in their lifetime, but I think we might have matched it, and I shudder to think what life holds in store. However, during this time of quarantine or shelter in place or whatever you want to call it, I've had both positive and negative feelings. I'm sure that you have too. And I'm not talking just about the coronavirus, I'm talking about the future of the church. Not just Vici Christian Church, but the church. I had some feelings a few years back when things started changing and people started to stop carrying their Bibles to church because their Bible was now on their telephone. And I remember saying to a few people, I'm not sure I like this, because they could turn that off on us. And I was met with, boy, you sure are negative. Don't you? I bet you don't think electricity is going to survive either, do you? Well, as the lady on television would say, well, golly gee whiz, you know. Look what we have discovered about the control that somebody else has over our lives. And you're going to see, for a period of time anyway, I don't know, I hope I don't get over it, but for a period of time, I think maybe it's time to go back and start relearning some things that we maybe have got lazy on. I discovered when I started teaching in the real estate industry, and I didn't prepare for the first couple of classes because I knew it so well, because I was a top producing agent, and I got up to teach those classes and I realized I've been using the tools so much that I've forgotten what the numbers are. And I had a whole class of beginners looking at me thinking I knew what I was talking about. So we're going to do a little bit of that in the coming weeks, and hopefully for the rest of my natural days. That will be the progress of my preaching. I believe we were born to be eagles, not turkeys. In studying this out, and I always find these sermons, special day sermons, to be difficult for me because I always wonder if somebody's thinking I'm making up stories that will talk about my mother. I'm not. That's why the Lord took her home at 48 years of age. She'd already earned her reward by raising me. But and I always don't know quite what to say because I feel like words are inadequate. Not just on Mother's Day, but any special day. But it came to my mind this week that as I was thinking about it, mother eagles don't raise turkeys. Mother eagles raise eagles. And I got to reading up on eagles. Now, I've always enjoyed watching eagles. Now, most of the time I have to settle for a hawk because we don't have a lot of eagles out in this end of the world. But I've always enjoyed watching the majesty with them with which they fly. And the grace I've always wondered where do they learn that? Well, I patronizingly say, well, from Mom, of course. Well, it turns out that's true. But when the mother eagle starts building her nest, I found this fascinating. When the mother eagle starts building her nest, she first forms the nest, and then she goes out and gathers up rocks and branches and all sorts of painful stuff and puts in the nest. Then she gathers up the fur and the straw to make the nest comfortable. I hope you're two blocks ahead of me on this. Because at some point, that baby eagle has to leave the nest. And we've heard all sorts of talk about it on television here recently, that people could get too comfortable at home. I can't. I have a wife. She won't allow that. But people get too comfortable at home, they're not going to want to go back to work. Well, the baby eagle can get so comfortable in that nest that they don't want to leave. So what's Mama Eagle do? She starts pulling out the soft stuff. And pretty soon, if they're going to stay in that nest, they've got to set on those rocks and those branches. And most of them, I guess somebody sits around and watches eagles, is how we know this. Most of them, it said, will leave the nest willingly because it's got too uncomfortable to be in it. Occasionally, there's one that has to be thrown out, that just refuses to leave. They're 35 years old, still living in the basement of the nest. But occasionally, they have to be coaxed. But they find out they were born to be eagles. In Isaiah, the 40th chapter, these words are written. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow weary. And his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. This has been one of my favorite passages of scriptures for years, and occasionally I have to get it out and read it to remind me I'm an eagle. But what about this business of being an eagle? I like how Isaiah starts his text. He says, do you not know? In other words, you ought to know what you are. But if you don't, haven't you been paying attention? Have you not heard? The Hebrew in this passage is very explicit. When the King James Version was translated, they cleaned up a lot of stuff and gentled it down so it wasn't so harsh. The prophets didn't say, I'm going to tell you something new that you might not have heard. Isaiah says you ought to already know this if you've been paying attention. When I read those words, I perk up. And the first thing that Isaiah says to us is, you should know that the Lord is everlasting. That He created the heavens and the earth. Why don't you see that? Amen. You know, I in the business world, periodically, I have to deal with one or two people that have decided they don't believe in God, never did. Now, I have a lot of philosophical problems with that concept because I had one atheist tell me he didn't believe in God anymore and he never did. I said, well, I'm not an English major, but there's a problem in the grammatical structure of your sentence. You cannot no longer believe in something you never believed in. And how do you explain all these things that are unexplainable? There's something out there. Even Napoleon, when he was approached by one of his generals, and Napoleon was not known to be a believer. When he was approached by one of his generals that asked him, said, do you believe in God? And he said, look out there. He said, somebody made it. It didn't just happen. Now, he didn't live during the scientific age where we have good models to go by instead of facts. He just looked out there and said, somebody built it. Even nature itself, the Apostle Paul told us, teaches us there is a creator. And that creator is God. And that God never gets frustrated. If you were God, how frustrated would you be right now? Yeah, I'm not talking about yesterday or tomorrow. I'm talking about just by today's present circumstances. If you were God, those of us that have children, especially grown children that we can't control anymore, like we ever could control our children. If you were God, how frustrated would you be looking down upon all your children? Now, what is it that frustrates us? Well, I can't tell you that right now because that's in the next point of the sermon. But I will say this, God doesn't have to get frustrated because He's all-powerful. When you know you can fix something, you don't have to get upset about it. It's when you don't know if you can fix it or not that you have to get upset. Years ago, my first ministry wasn't too far from here. It was down in Canton. I was laying carpet to supplement my income, and I took on a helper, and I told him, I said, now, don't worry about it. Just jump in there. You can't mess up anything I can't fix. Those are words as a human you should never say. It wasn't a few minutes later I heard that carpet ripping as he put his pressure on that stretcher, and he was a pretty good sized man, and he just ripped that carpet right in half. I looked at him and I said, well, Albert, we're going to find out whether I'm a liar or not here. I was able to fix it. I wasn't happy about it. I was frustrated. God doesn't have to get that way. He never gets tired or weary. And I love this part of the passage. His understanding, no one can fathom. Have y'all met my wife? I might as well be in the doghouse with Brandon. We've been married now 45 years, almost 46 years. I do not understand her. In fact, every day that passes, I find that I think she has multiple personalities, personally. How many of you men can feel my pain? Okay? But I sure enjoy her. And I've become somewhat needful. When she leaves, I simply say, be careful because I need you. It's narcissistic, I know, but I don't understand God. But Isaiah's going past that. He is not talking about us understanding God. He's talking about we can't understand God's understanding. You ever had a conversation with a 2-year-old? Isn't that wonderful? They know what they're saying. And they know what they mean. But we haven't got a clue. And we turn to the mother, this is Mom's Day, you know, and say, could you translate? And they make up something so that they don't have to feel bad about their mothering skills. I can't begin to understand what God understands. I told you I started out in life, I thought I was going to be a mechanic. I pursued that. My mother made me take typing classes because she said, you're going to need to know how to do this. I said, I don't need to know how to do anything but turn a wrench. That's all I'm going to do in my life. Now, to be a mechanic, knowledge of the keyboard is helpful. I do not understand a fraction about what I know about electronics. But it doesn't keep me from enjoying them. Now, on the other hand, I do understand this about God. He loves to give strength to those who will admit they're weak. and submit to it. So who's weak? Well, Isaiah says even young people grow weary. I don't, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to make light of anybody who's a senior in high school this year. I feel sorry for them because some of them, their graduation really means something to them. My mother cried, so I went back and went through mine. I would skip town if I could have got away with it. But, gosh, high school is a frustrating place to be. I feel sorry for people that was the highlight of their life. They've had a miserable life. You remember being young? Well, some of you remember, you're still young, as compared to some others in the room. In fact, some of us are just children. How frustrating it was. I wonder if they like me. That's where I developed my attitude. I don't care if you like me. But you sure get tired of it, don't you? I thought when our children were grown, my worries were over. No, they just added 10 more to it. And there's days I wake up, I don't want to go to bed, I just don't know where I want to go. Well, I know where I want to go. I want to get on a motorcycle and go. Wind therapy. And even youth stumble and fall. Do you notice what Isaiah, the progression he's made here? Isaiah says it starts here and it moves here. It starts up here in your head, and if you let the worry and the fear and the tiredness overcome you, you start stumbling and falling. My grandma Starbuck lived over at Shattuck. Every time we'd go to her house, all the grandkids, we still mimic this. We'd go to her house, we'd say, "How are you, Grandma?" She'd say, "I'm tired." I wasn't sure whether that was tar or tire. She'd say, "I'm tired." She was tired as long as I knew her. Well, life is kind of tiring, isn't it? And yet, those who hope in the Lord, says He'll renew their strength. The old King James translates that, those that wait upon the Lord. I don't know which one I like better, but I kind of like that idea, but I think the two combine, because it's those who wait in hopeful anticipation that God's going to do something. Well, I used to think when I was younger I couldn't wait till God did something. As I've gotten older and I can look back and see that He did, sometimes I say to the Lord, I know you're going to do something, but could I offer a suggestion or two? Just in case I'm not really ready for what you plan on doing with me. Those that hope in the Lord, do we put our trust completely in Him? Do we put our lives in His hands and say, Lord, I'll do whatever you want me to do? It's an old hymn. The title of it escapes me. It wasn't in my notes, so I didn't rehearse it. There's an old hymn out there that says, I give you my silver and my gold. I'll think of it and Tourette's it out here in a minute. I remember being in a revival meeting one night, and the song leader said, now if you're not willing to give all of your gold and silver to the Lord, don't sing this next verse. I think it was just the song leader and me, I was preaching, that sang the next verse. I thought, well, that was kind of unfair to throw on the congregation, because you made them stop to think about their commitment all at once in the middle of a song, and I'm not sure that's fair, since singing is emotional. But are we willing to put everything in God's hands? No. Jesus is not going to require of everyone, like He did the rich young ruler, and say to them, sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and follow me. That was a different circumstance. But He does call upon us to use our entire life and all of our possessions to His glory. had baptized a man a number of years ago in student ministry while I was going to Midwest. And he came to me one day and he said, I'm starting to feel guilty about things I have been thinking about selling my boat. Can you think of any justification why I should keep it? I said, yeah, we're starting to get some kids in this church and you could take them to the lake. He thought about that for a minute. He bought a bigger boat. To my knowledge, he used it in the church youth group up until the day he sold it finally, when he couldn't manage the boat any longer. I don't know whether that's the best illustration for that or not, but are we using our possessions and our things as our hope in the Lord? Because if our hope is in the Lord, who never grows weary, He'll renew our strength. I'm normal, just like you. I didn't used to think so. And many in my life have told me that there was nothing normal about me. But I think they were just trying to get me on medication. And there's times when I question everything. There's times when I'm weary. There's times when I'm tired. But the one thing I always go back to is, Lord, you got me through it last time. You'll get me through it again. I can remember growing up, my parents, and I think I had pretty good parents. I had a good childhood. But I can remember that that period of time in history anyway, there was a way of raising children that's a little different than it is today. Parents didn't mind their children failing. After having raised 4 and 10 grandchildren, I'm not as tough as I used to be. But there is something to be said allowing a child to fail every now and then, so they learn how to get up. And there are times when I was growing up when somebody would be trying to teach me something that I went into the 12-year-old boy routine of, yeah, I know that. Yep, I know that. Here, I'll take care of it. And my parents just backed off and said, go for it. Sometimes God does that. But when we say, Lord, I screwed up. That's a direct biblical quote, by the way. No, not really. Lord, I messed up again. Will you help? He says, sure. Not a problem. He renews our strength. And with that renewed strength, we soar. We soar on wings like eagles. I love watching an eagle fly. I love watching any bird fly. I'm starting to worry about myself because I sit in the morning eating breakfast watching the birds in the backyard. I think that's what they do at the nut house, but that may describe our home. I don't know. But I love watching the eagles soar. So graceful. Do you notice they don't hardly ever flap their wings? They soar. Flying is this. Soaring is this. They have learned about the air currents, and they let those air currents get under them, and they fly from one current to the next. We soar when we learn about the Holy Spirit dwelling in our lives and providing that wind beneath our wings. Because we want to soar. I don't run anymore. I never did run very good. Some people run gracefully. I like watching those people just run, their feet just seem to lightly touch the ground. I ran because a drill instructor told me he was going to take my head off if I didn't run. So fear is my only motivation. I guarantee you, if you see me running, you're late. Because I'll put it off until I'm convinced I can't whip whatever's coming. So this idea of being able to run and not grow weary. You notice the words? We will be able to act without becoming frustrated in our minds. And we can even walk and not faint. Yeah, I'm getting to that age. I don't fall regularly, but only when I try to pick up something off the floor. And I know if I could drop about 200 pounds, that would help. The doctors say I'd still be slightly overweight, but it would help. That's not true. It'd be 100 pounds, wouldn't it? But I like the picture there. Because you see, I'm an eagle. It's an old story. I've known it for years. I told it to Deb again the other day just to get her reaction because I was going to include it in the sermon, and I realized I hadn't used it in the sermon for maybe 20 years. She couldn't remember it. That was a blow to my ego. She was in the nursery, she said. Probably so. Old story about Mama and Papa Eagle. They had all those babies in the nest, and they'd had to sit in that nest and sit on them eggs. And by the way, they take turns. And they finally, those young eagles hatched out, and they went out and found whatever it was they would feed them, and they fed those eagles. And they finally decided, you know, those kids were getting old enough, they needed a break. So off they flew on their break. Not intending to be gone a long time, but then a storm arose and shook the nest, and the two baby eagles fell out of the nest and down into the forest. They looked around and they didn't know where they were at, and they didn't see Mom. They started wandering around and wandered through the forest until finally they came upon an old turkey hen. And they told her their plight, and she said, well, you know, I haven't got any children of my own. Why don't you just come home with me? And I'll take care of you. So these two baby eagles went home with Mama Turkey, and she raised them. One day, as they were fully grown and they were out pecking on the ground, one of the eagles looked over in the bushes and he saw this nice plump rabbit. He looked at his brother and he said, you know, I know this is wrong, but I just have an overwhelming desire to eat that thing over there. Oh, his brother said, that's bad, that's bad. You're a turkey. Turkeys eat grubs and peck things, insects off the ground. You're a turkey. Just wipe that out of your head. And he said, I just can't get it out of my mind. Next day he said, you know, I got another problem. I have a desire to fly. I just think maybe if I'd flap these wings a little bit and jump off that cliff, oh, you can't do that. You jump off that cliff, gravity's going to take, turkeys don't fly. What are you're getting depressed and suicidal here? He put it out of his mind. Every day was something else. And his brother said, no, we're turkeys. Mom and Dad are turkeys, all our friends are turkeys, everybody we know is a turkey. We're turkeys. So I'm aware of that, but I just can't get it out of my head that if I just run out there and jump off the top of that hill, I'd fly. An old owl was listening to the conversation one day, and he looked down at it and he said, boys, you're not turkeys. You're eagles. And the one brother looked up at him and said, you just mind your own business. We're turkeys. We raise turkeys. Everybody knows turkey. We're turkeys. Turned to his brother and said, you just get this nonsense out of your head. His brother just turned and looked at him and said, I don't think I can. And he took off running. And he jumped off that mountain, and guess what happened? He flew. His brother said, I just don't believe what I'm seeing. And he went back to pecking in the ground. We're eagles. I have no desire to be anything else. That's why I got scars all over my body. I don't believe in 50%, I believe in 150%. And God said, if you put your hope in me, you're going to soar. I got so excited writing this sermon, I have to admit it. I got so excited writing this sermon and thinking about the world situation today, and I got to thinking, man, I can't think of another period of time I'd rather be alive in. Morality's in the toilet. Everybody's broke on the world scene. We're all sick from some virus we don't know about and haven't really seen it yet, but we're working on it. We've run into a world full of scaredy cats. I can't think of a better time to be alive. Because if we'll do it, God's power can really shine. I like to be a part of that. We serve a God of wonders. He parted the Red Sea. I heard Tony Campolis use this one day in a sermon. I loved it. He said, when I see that, I read that in the scripture, all I can do is say to my child's eyes, do it again. We just spent a little time, we took advantage of the shutdown and traveled, like you weren't supposed to. Went to see some of our grandkids, and I just love a child's mind. You do something fascinating, what do they say? Do it again. Do it again. And God says, unless we become like little children, we'll not enter the kingdom of heaven. Part of that Red Sea once, Lord, I'd like to see it again. They fed the multitudes once, I'd like to see it again. They baptized 3,000 people on Pentecost. I can work overtime. Don't bother me. Do it again. But it starts with us putting our hope in Him. Stand with me and sing, God wants.